Hi, I'm Matthew Klinkert, and this is my master's project video presentation. First, a little bit about me. I'm 33 years old, and I currently live in New York City, New York State. In 2009, I graduated from Northeastern Illinois University with a bachelor's degree in English and a bachelor's degree in philosophy. Following graduation, I worked as a reporter for 2 years. Then I moved to South Korea immediately after, and for the last 6 years, I've taught there. Before I worked as a reporter and teacher, I was a tutor at the Writing Center at Northeastern Illinois University, where I spent most of my time working extensively with college level ELLs, helping them write, edit, and proofread their works. A little bit more about me. From 2012 to 2018, I taught kindergarten through 12th grade, college, and adult level ELLs in places throughout South Korea. In that time, I also learned to speak Korean. My content varied from day to day, but most of it was focused generally on English language education, or ELE. Because I worked at academies, I was often able to select most of the content for my students. It's a luxury that public school teachers don't usually have. With beginner level ELLs, we spent a lot of time on communicative competence, guided reading, total physical response, and other things. With intermediate and advanced level ELLs, we spent a lot of time engaging with topics that required critical thinking and discussion, a lot of group work on graphic organizers, projects, and presentations. So now we will take a look at my ePortfolio standard discussion. First, we'll look at Standard 1.1 from the Council for the Accreditation of Educator Preparation, CAEP. CAEP Standard 1.1 stated that future teachers should show their comprehension and ability to apply skills specific to their discipline, in our case, skills specific to TESOL. The artifacts I chose to meet this standard were my midterm and final exams from our second language SLA class at the University of Kansas. In this class, we focused a lot on cognitive, behavioral, affective, among other factors that influence language acquisition for English language learners. That said, I chose these artifacts specifically because after revisiting them, I realized I'd spent a ton of time focusing on theories present in both, extrapolating on them, finding different criticisms of them, possible applications and misapplications. So I think I adequately demonstrated my knowledge of these theories, which in turn demonstrates my knowledge of TESOL. Regarding the selected artifacts, we'll discuss further. I chose my midterm and final exams because, like I said, they adequately demonstrate my ability to examine, reference, discuss, and apply various tools and theories related to our field. Additionally, my midterm exam looked a lot at the CPH critical period hypothesis, using Kaplan's theory evaluation tool, which I'll call TET throughout this discussion. My final exam delved more into BICS, or basic communication skills, interpersonal communication skills, and CALP, cognitive academic language proficiency. These are two very important frameworks in the field of SLA and TESOL at large that explain how learners and people as a whole speak in different ways, whether they're in the classroom, at work, on the playground with their friends, in a university setting, in a board meeting. So we'll look further at those. Regarding my midterm exam from our SLA class, I'll talk a little bit more about that here. In my midterm exam, I met CAEP Standard 1.1 by showing my knowledge of the critical period hypothesis and TET. these are two theoretical frameworks, as I said, that are relevant to SLA and therefore the TESOL field as a whole. CPH is a theory that says there's an optimal period for language acquisition that ends around puberty. Afterwards, it becomes really difficult for people to acquire a language or a new language. With this in mind, I used TET to show that the critical period hypothesis really doesn't explain itself well, and therefore you can't really falsify it. For example, it lacks explanatory power because it cannot show adequately all the elements that are considered essential to its frame of reference. So basically, without substantial evidence and strong argument, CPH is really lacking in explanatory power. And this ties into other aspects of TET because, for example, if it lacks explanatory power and you read about it, you can't really falsify or show that it's a strong theory. Basically, CPH claims that children are better language learners without using evidence. Therefore, it's just weak. Regarding my final exam from our SLA class, which I'll talk about further here, in my final exam, I met CAP Standard 1.1 by showing my knowledge of BICS and CALP, both of which are also relevant to SLA, and therefore, as I said, the field of TESOL as a whole. According to Brown, BICS is defined as the communicative capacity that all human beings use to function in daily, personal, or interpersonal exchanges, while CALP is more specialized and complex communication that you'd use in classroom exercises, on tests and reading assignments, in your own writing. So you can see right away that they're extremely different. As previously stated, by distinguishing or separating things between these two frameworks, I've been able to tune my curriculum and instruction and concentrate more so on the things that matter to me, like students' varying levels of proficiency and how that connects to designing curriculum. Because without really understanding students' abilities in both of these fields, you can't really design curriculum that accommodates and focuses on their strong parts or strong aspects and weak aspects. The key takeaways from this portfolio discussion were as follows. Some of the key takeaways were, for one, it's important to realize that students can learn a language at almost any age. That CPH isn't really sound and valid kind of proves that. There is no golden period for learning a language. You can't really say that 7-year-olds or 8-year-olds learn better than teenagers or adults. For example, adults can be better ELLs because they've had years to master their first language, which helps them acquire a new language. Moreover, they've been in school longer, so they've developed learning strategies like note-taking, using concrete examples when they explain things or learn things, or memorization tasks like making flashcards. At the same time, young language learners have a greater chance of losing their L1 accent because they're usually exposed to new language for longer periods of time throughout the day. So that's an advantage that adult ELLs don't possess. Last, it's important for teachers to distinguish between those two frameworks, BICS and CALP, so they don't really discount one or the other. For example, BICS is just as important as CALP because ELLs need to understand the unspoken rules and norms of communication in social settings. Without these things, they can't really function on a pragmatic level, much like we do in our daily lives. Without understanding these rules and norms, as I said, students cannot understand things like turn taking, making suggestions like, would you like to get something from the cafeteria, or would you like to come over to my house after school, or even joking. which is a very important rhetorical device later on in life. Additionally, it's necessary to encourage students to engage in academic conversation, discourse, writing when they're in the classroom because basic communication skills are just too simple for these tasks. You really need to have a strong grasp on cognitive academic language because you need that language to really stress your points and make arguments. So let's talk about my final thoughts on these standards and artifacts the standard and artifacts that I chose. Two things are clear after selecting and re-examining each of these artifacts and standard. First, as I stated, it's really vital to thoroughly examine misconceptions and unfounded beliefs about language learning. Without doing that, you can't really move forward and really hone in on the theories that you can tie into your own curriculum and instruction that will improve it. Second, it's essential to know and at times adhere to well-founded theories that really help our instruction and enhance our teaching capabilities. Like I said, if you can sift through theories that are lacking, then you can really find the ones that'll help your instruction and curriculum. That said, both of these artifacts once again showcased my ability to use the related research to improve my own instruction and curriculum design, which ties into my overall knowledge of teaching English to speakers of other languages. Without such knowledge, I really think that I couldn't move forward as much as I have over these last 2 years and become more of a professional teacher. Looking ahead, as I mentioned about my profession, now that we've examined both artifacts from our SLA course at KU, let's take a more in-depth look at what the future has in store for me, myself. Over the last 2 years, KU has really improved my instruction and curriculum, so I feel ready for even greater challenges than I had in South Korea in more diverse environments. Learning about different educational models and tools like SIOP, critical literacy, project-based learning, formative and summative assessments, guided reading, and explicit phonics instruction has totally changed the way I teach. Additionally, these topics have made me much more active in class because I know what knowledge to draw on, and because our program taught me how to thoroughly assess different learners, situations, and content. I've become far more patient. Before learning all of these things, it was a lot more difficult to adequately teach my students, so I'm thankful for everything I've learned. Let's look ahead once again. With all of this in mind, where can I go from here? Looking back, I can honestly say that my experience in South Korea had many highs and lows. For one, EFL education in South Korea is very well funded and accessible, and students are passionate. A lot of my kids really love to learn, and they came in every day and focused as hard as they could. That said, EFL education, specifically public education, well, private education too, tends to be rote, test-oriented, and teacher-centered. It's a very Confucian society, so students are expected to respect teachers and focus on everything they say diligently. Too often, students in South Korea, because of these things, study excessively until 10 or 11 o'clock at night at cram schools. This is one of the reasons South Korea has one of the highest suicide rates among teenagers in the world. Moreover, classrooms like the country at large are very homogenous, and Koreans can be very nationalistic, so oftentimes anything I would show my students would get confused looks or disinterested faces. It's very hard to show them new information from different cultures. Knowing all of this, I'm ready for a new environment, one with more diverse students, which will really align with everything I've learned in this program. That's why, in fact, I moved to New York, and I plan on becoming a teaching fellow with NYC Public Schools in the future, because I really want to engage in that kind of teaching.